Chapter 1. A new year. A new idea. Snowflakes drifted lazily past the wide front windows of Howard's Books, settling in soft heaps along the sidewalk. Inside, the air was warm and smelled faintly of old paper and cinnamon. The remnants of a holiday candle Doug had burned down to the wick. He stood behind the counter, mug in hand, watching the town's main street through the glass. January had a way of making everything look like a fresh start, even if nothing had really changed. Doug Howard, 32, single and owner of the coziest bookstore in town, had been back here for 5 years. 4 of those years he'd spent building this place into something special, a refuge for readers, a quiet corner of the world where time slowed down. The back of the shop was his pride. Recliners arranged in conversational clusters, reading tables with brass lamps casting a warm glow, and shelves that curved like gentle waves along the walls. It wasn't just a bookstore. It was a sanctuary. He took a sip of coffee, grimaced at the bitterness, and set the mug down. He'd gotten used to the coffee from being there, the little shop down the street. Lisa Potts ran it. Late 20s, single mom, always smiling even when her eyes looked tired. Doug admired that about her, though he'd never said more than medium roast, please, and thanks. He wasn't the type to linger over conversations. Not anymore. The bell above the door jingled, and a gust of cold air swept in with a customer. Doug greeted them with a nod, rang up a paperback, and returned to his thoughts. He wasn't lonely, not exactly. He had his books, his regulars, his quiet routines. But sometimes, like now, when the year felt new and full of possibility, he wondered if he'd built walls as sturdy as the shelves around him. By noon, the snow had thickened, and Doug decided he needed real coffee. He locked up for lunch and walked the short block to Bean there. The bell over Lisa's door chimed as he stepped inside, and warmth wrapped around him like a blanket. The smell of fresh pastries made his stomach growl. Lisa stood behind the counter, her auburn hair pulled into a messy bun, laughing softly with one of her baristas. Doug ordered his usual and waited, half listening, until a few words caught his attention. Rent hike? Can't keep this up. Maybe a month or 2 left, Lisa murmured, her voice low but urgent. Doug froze, his hand tightening around his wallet. He hadn't meant to eavesdrop, but the words landed like a stone in his chest. Closing, Bean there was part of the town's heartbeat. And Lisa, she'd worked so hard to make this place hers. The barista nodded sympathetically, and Lisa sighed, pressing a hand to her forehead. I don't know what else to do. Doug's coffee arrived, and he thanked the barista, but his mind was already spinning. He wasn't impulsive. He didn't play the hero. But this was an opportunity. For her, for him, for something bigger than either of them. He waited until the barista drifted to the back before stepping closer. Lisa. She looked up, startled. Doug, right? From the bookstore. Yeah. He hesitated, then plunged ahead. Do you have a minute? Somewhere private. Her brows knit in confusion. Sure? Is everything okay? Nothing bad, he said quickly. Just an idea, if you're willing. Lisa glanced at her employee, then back at Doug. Curiosity flickered in her eyes. 5 minutes. That's all I need. She untied her apron, told the barista she'd be right back, and followed Doug out into the cold. Snow crunched under their boots as they walked the short distance to Howard's Books. Lisa hugged her coat tighter, shooting him a sideways look. You're not about to pitch me a pyramid scheme, are you? She teased, half joking, half wary. Doug chuckled. No pyramids. Promise. He held the door open for her and warmth spilled out. Lisa stepped inside, her gaze sweeping over the shelves, the soft lighting, the quiet hum of a space built for comfort. Doug led her to the back, where the reading lounge opened like a secret garden of books. Lisa stopped short. Wow, I've never seen this part. Doug smiled faintly. Most people don't make it past the front shelves. But this is where the magic happens. She turned in a slow circle, taking in the recliners, the lamps, the cozy corners. It's beautiful. Thanks. Doug shoved his hands into his pockets, suddenly aware of how crazy this might sound. Listen, I overheard you talking about the rent. About maybe closing. Lisa stiffened, her cheeks flushing. You heard that? Couldn't help it, he said gently. And I'm sorry if this is overstepping, but what if you didn't have to close? Her eyes narrowed. Go on. Doug gestured around the room. There's more than enough space here for you to run your coffee shop. We could split the rent. You'd have a built-in audience, people who love books and coffee. And I'd get more foot traffic. Win-win. Lisa blinked. You're serious? Dead serious. No strings. We draw up a business agreement, make it official. Protect both of us. She walked slowly through the lounge, fingertips grazing the back of a chair. It's crazy. Maybe, Doug admitted, but good crazy. She stopped at the far corner, the one tucked away but visible from the entrance. If I did this, that's where the counter would go. Back here. It'd pull people through the space. Doug followed her gaze, imagining it. Perfect. Lisa bit her lip, thinking. I'd need a kitchen area. For the bakery. We'll bring in a designer, Doug said. See what's possible. Silence stretched between them, filled with the soft tick of the wall clock and the muffled hush of snow outside. Finally, Lisa turned, a spark in her eyes he hadn't seen before. "Okay," she said. "Let's talk." Doug exhaled, a smile tugging at his mouth. For the first time in a long time, the math felt right. Chapter 2. The Walk to Possibility. Lisa wasn't sure what she expected when Doug said, 5 minutes. But it wasn't this. The bookstore felt like stepping into another world. A world where time slowed and the air hummed with quiet promise. She trailed behind him, her boots squeaking faintly on the polished wood floor, her mind racing faster than her feet. Doug moved with a calm confidence, like someone who knew every inch of the space and loved it. He led her past rows of books, their spines lined like soldiers, until the shop opened into a lounge that made her stop in her tracks. "Oh," she breathed, almost to herself. Doug turned, watching her take it in. "Not what you expected? Not even close." Lisa walked forward slowly, her eyes sweeping over the recliners arranged in cozy clusters, the warm pools of light spilling from brass lamps, the shelves curving like gentle waves along the walls. It felt less like a store and more like someone's living room, if that someone had impeccable taste and a love affair with literature. "It's beautiful," she said, and meant it. Doug's mouth curved in a modest smile. "Thanks. I wanted it to feel comfortable, like a place you'd want to stay." Lisa nodded, still turning in a slow circle. "You nailed it." He shoved his hands into his pockets, suddenly aware of how much was riding on this moment. "So, here's the thing." He gestured around the room. "I overheard you talking about the rent, about maybe closing." Lisa froze, her cheeks flushing. "You heard that?" "Couldn't help it," Doug said gently. "And I'm sorry if this is overstepping, but what if you didn't have to close?" Her brows knit. "Doug, I appreciate the concern, but unless you've got a magic wand in one of these bookshelves." "No wand," he said, lips twitching. "Just an idea." She crossed her arms, curiosity sparking despite herself. "I'm listening." Doug took a breath. "What if you moved your coffee shop here, into this space? We'd split the rent. You'd have a built-in audience, people who love books and coffee, and I'd get more foot traffic. Win-win." Lisa blinked. "You're serious?" "Dead serious. No strings. We'd draw up a business agreement, make it official. Protect both of us." She stared at him, then at the room, then back at him. "Doug, that's crazy." "Maybe," he admitted, "but good crazy." Lisa walked slowly through the lounge, fingertips grazing the back of a chair. Her mind spun with logistics, kitchen space, permits, equipment. But beneath the practical noise was something else. Hope. Fragile, flickering, but there. She stopped at the far corner, the one tucked away but visible from the entrance. If I did this, that's where the counter would go. Back here. It'd pull people through the space. Doug followed her gaze, imagining it. Perfect. Lisa bit her lip, thinking. I'd need a kitchen area. For the bakery. We'll bring in a designer, Doug said. See what's possible. She turned to him, eyes narrowing slightly. Why are you doing this? Doug hesitated, then shrugged. Because I like your coffee, and because I believe in small businesses. Too many chains are running good people out of work. I can't stop the world from spinning, but I can help where I can. Lisa studied him for a long moment, as if trying to read the fine print in his expression. Finally, she smiled. A small, cautious smile, but a smile nonetheless. Okay, she said. Let's talk. Doug exhaled, relief washing through him. For the first time in a long time, the math felt right. They spent the next half hour walking the space, tossing ideas back and forth. Lisa's practical side wrestled with her imagination, but every time she pictured the coffee counter nestled among the books, her pulse quickened. Could work. It might work. Doug grabbed a notepad from the counter and started sketching rough layouts. We'd need to knock down this wall, he said, pointing to a narrow partition near the back. Open up the flow. Lisa leaned over his shoulder, her hair brushing his arm. And I'd need plumbing for the espresso machine, plus ovens for the pastries. Permits, inspections, Doug added. We'll do it right. Lisa laughed softly. You make it sound so easy. Doug glanced at her, his smile warm. It won't be easy, but it'll be worth it. For a moment, their eyes held, just long enough for something unspoken to flicker between them. Then Lisa cleared her throat and straightened. Okay, next step. I'll call a designer, Doug said. Someone local. We'll see what's possible. Lisa nodded, her pulse still humming. Doug. Yeah. Thanks, she said quietly. For believing. Doug's smile deepened. Anytime. Outside, the snow kept falling, soft and steady, as if the world itself was rooting for them. Chapter 3. Plans and Permits. The following Tuesday, Doug stood in the back of his bookstore, nervously straightening a stack of magazines that didn't need straightening. He wasn't sure why he felt like a teenager waiting for a date. This was business, not whatever his pulse seemed to think it was. The front bell jingled, and Lisa stepped in, brushing snow from her coat. She looked different today. Hair down, cheeks pink from the cold, a scarf looped loosely around her neck. Doug told himself not to notice, then immediately failed. Hey, she said, smiling. Designers on the way? Any minute. Doug gestured toward the lounge. Want some coffee while we wait? I've got the sad kind, instant. Lisa laughed, the sound warm and easy. I'll pass. I brought the good stuff. She held up a thermos like a trophy. Doug grinned. You're already improving the place. Before he could say more, the bell chimed again, and a tall man in a wool coat strode in, carrying a leather portfolio. Doug Howard? He asked, scanning the room. That's me. Doug shook his hand. Thanks for coming. The designer introduced himself as Mark, all brisk efficiency and sharp eyes. He took one look at the lounge and whistled. Nice space. Cozy. You want to add a coffee shop? Lisa stepped forward. Not just coffee, pastries too. I need a small kitchen. Mark nodded, already pulling out a tape measure. Let's see what we're working with. For the next hour, the room buzzed with activity. Mark measured walls, tested lighting, and sketched layouts while Doug and Lisa hovered nearby, tossing ideas back and forth like kids planning a treehouse. What if the counter curves? Lisa suggested, peering at the sketch. Like a smile. Doug tilted his head. A smiling counter. I like it. Inviting. Mark scribbled, muttering about plumbing and electrical lines. We'll need permits for the kitchen. Health inspections. Ventilation. Lisa groaned softly. Permits. My favorite word. Doug chuckled. Better than eviction. She shot him a look, half amused, half exasperated. Fair point. As Mark worked, Doug found himself watching Lisa more than the blueprints. The way she leaned over the table, brow furrowed in concentration. The way her laughter bubbled up when Mark suggested a pastry display shaped like a book spine. She was practical, yes, but there was a spark in her. A stubborn light that refused to dim even under pressure. So, Lisa said, glancing at Doug as Mark stepped away to check a wall. You really think this will work? Doug met her gaze. I don't just think. I know. Her lips curved, slow and uncertain, like someone testing the weight of hope. You sound pretty sure of yourself. Comes with owning a bookstore, Doug said lightly. We deal in happy endings. Lisa laughed, shaking her head. You're something else. Doug smiled, feeling something warm settle in his chest. He wasn't sure what it was yet, but he knew he didn't want it to go away. By the time Mark packed up his portfolio, the plan was clear. Knock down 2 walls, install kitchen equipment, add plumbing, and create a glass partition for visibility. It would take weeks, maybe months, but the vision was there. A coffee shop inside a bookstore, a partnership that felt less like survival and more like possibility. I'll send the design mock-ups by Friday, Mark said, shaking hands. You two have good energy. This'll be fun. Lisa raised a brow. Fun? That's one word for it. Doug grinned. Better than disaster. Mark laughed and headed out, leaving Doug and Lisa alone in the quiet hum of the lounge. Lisa exhaled, rubbing her temples. Well, that's a lot. Doug nodded. It is, but we'll figure it out. She looked at him then, really looked, and for a moment, the air between them felt charged, like the pause before a page turns. Okay, she said softly. Let's make it happen. Doug smiled, and for the first time in years, he felt the thrill of something new, something worth the risk. Outside, the snow had stopped, leaving the world bright and clean, as if it were rooting for them. Chapter 4. Breaking walls and breaking ice. The first swing of the sledgehammer was louder than Doug expected. It echoed through the bookstore like a cannon blast, sending a flock of dust motes swirling in the sunlight. He winced, glancing toward the front where a couple of regulars were pretending not to notice the chaos. Sorry, Doug called, offering an apologetic smile. Renovations. Temporary insanity. The customers chuckled and returned to their books, but Doug still felt a pang of guilt. His sanctuary was turning into a construction zone, and he wasn't sure whether to laugh or cry. Lisa, on the other hand, looked positively gleeful. She stood near the back wall, arms crossed, watching the contractor demolish the partition with the kind of satisfaction usually reserved for revenge plots. Never thought I'd enjoy watching something get destroyed, she said, grinning. Doug smirked. Therapeutic, isn't it? Very. She shot him a sideways glance. You sure you're okay with this? Your cozy reading nook is about to look like a war zone. Doug shrugged, though his stomach did a nervous flip. It's temporary. Besides, chaos builds character. Lisa laughed, and the sound warmed the room more than the space heaters humming in the corners. Doug found himself smiling back, even as another wall came crashing down. By noon, the bookstore looked like a crime scene. Plaster dust everywhere, tools scattered across the floor, and Doug sporting a streak of white on his sweater that made him look like he'd lost a fight with a bag of flour. Lisa noticed and burst out laughing. Doug, you've got something. She gestured vaguely at his chest. Doug looked down, groaned, and tried to brush it off, only succeeding in smearing it further. Great. I'm a walking chalkboard. Hold still. Lisa stepped closer, brushing at his sweater with quick, efficient strokes. Her fingers grazed his arm, and for one ridiculous second, Doug forgot how to breathe. There, she said, smiling up at him. Almost human again. Thanks, he managed. his voice a little rougher than intended. Before the moment could stretch into something dangerous, a small voice piped up from the doorway. "Mommy!" Doug turned to see a little girl barreling toward Lisa, a whirlwind of pink coat and pigtails. Lisa dropped to her knees, catching her daughter in a hug that looked like pure sunshine. "Emma!" Lisa laughed, kissing her cheek. "What are you doing here?" "Grandma dropped me off," Emma said solemnly, then spotted Doug and tilted her head. "Who's that?" Doug crouched down, smiling. "I'm Doug. I own the bookstore." Emma's eyes widened. "You have all the books?" "Pretty much," Doug said. "You like books?" Emma nodded vigorously. "And cookies." Lisa groaned. "Of course you do." Doug chuckled. "Well, you're in luck. Soon, this place will have both." Emma's face lit up like a Christmas tree. "Best store ever." Doug felt something warm settle in his chest, a feeling he hadn't expected, but didn't mind at all. The afternoon passed in a blur of noise and laughter. Lisa and Doug worked side by side, hauling debris, making jokes about their non-existent construction skills, and sharing coffee from Lisa's thermos like conspirators in a grand scheme. At one point, Doug tried to move a stack of drywall and nearly toppled it onto himself. Lisa swooped in, grabbing the edge just in time. "Careful," she scolded, eyes wide. "I do not need you in traction before opening day." Doug grinned sheepishly. "Guess I'm more of a book guy than a wall guy." Lisa shook her head, laughing. "Stick to novels, hero." By the time the contractors packed up, the back of the store looked like a skeleton, bare studs, exposed wiring, and a floor littered with sawdust. It was messy, chaotic, and oddly exhilarating. Lisa stood in the middle of it all, hands on her hips, eyes shining. "It's happening," she said softly, almost to herself. Doug joined her, surveying the wreckage with a grin. "It is." She glanced at him then, and for a moment, the noise faded, the dust settled, and it was just the two of them standing in the middle of a dream they hadn't known they shared. "Thanks, Doug," she said quietly. "For everything." Doug met her gaze, his smile slow and certain. "We're just getting started." Outside, dusk painted the snow in shades of lavender and gold, and for the first time in years, Doug felt like his life was under construction, in the best possible way. Chapter 5. Brewing Friendship. The bookstore was quiet after hours, the kind of quiet Doug loved, soft, layered with the faint scent of paper and the distant hum of the heater. He sat at the big oak table in the lounge, blueprints spread out like a map to buried treasure. His laptop glowed with spreadsheets, numbers marching in neat columns that promised chaos if they didn't behave. The front door clicked open, and Lisa slipped inside, balancing a box of pastries and a folder under one arm. Her cheeks were pink from the cold, her hair tucked into a knit cap that made her look younger, almost carefree. "Hope you're hungry," she said, setting the box down with a flourish. "I bribed myself with sugar to get through tonight." Doug grinned. "You didn't have to." "Oh, I did," Lisa said, flipping open the lid to reveal golden croissants and chocolate muffins. "Trust me, these meetings require carbs." Doug laughed, pulling out a chair for her. "Fair point." She sat, tugging off her cap and shaking out her hair. Doug tried not to notice the way it framed her face, then gave up and noticed anyway. "So," Lisa said, spreading out her folder. "Budget, permits, the thrilling stuff." Doug groaned. "My favorite bedtime reading." Lisa smirked. "Don't pretend you're not secretly excited about plumbing diagrams." Doug chuckled, leaning back. "I'm more of a plot twist guy." Lisa laughed, and for a moment, the tension of numbers and deadlines melted into something lighter, something that felt like friendship blooming in the middle of blueprints. They worked for an hour, scribbling notes, crunching figures, and debating everything from countertop materials to pastry display angles. Doug discovered Lisa had a sharp business mind, quick and practical, but with a streak of creativity that made her ideas sparkle. "Glass partition," she said, tapping the sketch. "Keeps the space open but defines the coffee area." Doug nodded. "And lets people see the magic happen." Lisa smiled. "Magic. Coffee is magic," Doug said solemnly. "Books are magic. Combine them, and you've got super magic." Lisa laughed so hard she nearly spilled her coffee. "Super magic? That's your pitch." "Trademark pending," Doug said, deadpan. As the night deepened, conversation drifted beyond business. Lisa told him about Emma, how she loved dinosaurs and bedtime stories, how she insisted on wearing mismatched socks because they're friends. Doug listened, smiling, picturing the little whirlwind from earlier. "She's amazing," Doug said softly. Lisa's expression softened. "She is. She's everything." Doug hesitated, then said, "Must be hard, doing it all on your own." Lisa shrugged, a flicker of vulnerability crossing her face. "Some days, but I wouldn't trade it." Doug nodded, feeling a tug of admiration, and something else he didn't want to name yet. Lisa tilted her head. "What about you? Any family?" Doug hesitated, fingers tracing the edge of a blueprint. "Just me. And the books." She smiled gently. "You like it that way?" Doug exhaled, the words coming slower now. "I used to think I did." Then I spent years chasing a life that wasn't mine. Corporate job, fancy apartment, engagement that didn't last. Lisa's brows lifted. Engagement. Doug nodded, a wry smile tugging at his mouth. She wanted someone who could give her the world. I thought if I worked hard enough, I could. Turns out, the math didn't compute. Lisa studied him, her eyes warm. So you walked away? Yeah. Doug's voice was quiet but steady. Quit the job. Ended the engagement. Came home. I wasn't running. I was finding my center again. Lisa didn't speak for a moment, and the silence felt like understanding rather than judgment. Finally, she said softly, "That takes guts." Doug shrugged, but her words settled deep, like a weight he didn't mind carrying. They worked a little longer, but the mood had shifted, lighter, easier, threaded with something unspoken. When Lisa packed up, Doug walked her to the door, the night air crisp and bright beyond the glass. "Same time tomorrow?" she asked, smiling. Doug nodded. "Wouldn't miss it." She paused, her hand on the door, and for a heartbeat, it felt like the world held still, just long enough for Doug to wonder what it would be like if she stayed. Then she was gone, her laughter lingering like the scent of warm pastries. Doug locked up, turned off the lights, and stood in the quiet, feeling something he hadn't felt in years: anticipation. Chapter 6. The grand opening countdown. 2 weeks before opening day, Doug stood in the middle of what used to be his serene reading lounge and wondered if he'd lost his mind. The space was a whirlwind of half-installed counters, dangling wires, and the sharp scent of fresh paint. Contractors moved like ants, shouting measurements over the hum of drills. Doug clutched his clipboard like a lifeline, scanning the latest invoice with a sinking feeling. "Tell me that number is wrong," he muttered. "It's not wrong," Lisa said, appearing at his elbow with a cup of coffee and a look that said she'd been doing her own mental math. "It's just ambitious." Doug groaned. "Ambitious is code for terrifying." Lisa smirked. "Welcome to entrepreneurship." He shot her a look. "You sound way too calm about this." "I'm not calm," she said, sipping her coffee. "I'm caffeinated." "Big difference." Doug laughed despite himself, but the knot in his stomach didn't loosen. Delays had piled up, permits took longer than expected, the oven shipment was late, and the plumbing crew had vanished for 3 days because of a family emergency. Now the budget was wobbling like a chair with one leg missing. "We're cutting it close," Doug said, scanning the schedule. "If one more thing goes wrong." "It won't," Lisa said firmly, setting her cup down. "We'll make it work." Doug looked at her, really looked, and for a moment, the chaos faded. She was steady, grounded, her eyes bright with determination. He envied that, needed it maybe more than he realized. "You always this optimistic?" he asked. Lisa smiled wryly. "No, but I've learned something. Panic doesn't pay the bills." Doug chuckled, shaking his head. "Fair point." They spent the afternoon wrangling details, calling suppliers, negotiating with contractors, and scribbling adjustments on blueprints until the paper looked like a battlefield. At one point, Lisa suggested swapping the marble countertop for butcher block to save money, and Doug hesitated. "I don't know," he said. "Marble looks elegant." Lisa raised a brow. "Marble looks expensive." Doug sighed. "You're right." Lisa grinned. "Say that again. Slower." Doug laughed, tossing his pen at her. "Don't get used to it." As the sun dipped behind the snowy rooftops, tension simmered beneath the banter. Doug felt it in the way Lisa's laugh lingered, in the way her hand brushed his when they reached for the same blueprint. It was subtle, unspoken, but there, like a current humming under the surface. Then came the near argument. "I still think the pastry case should go near the front," Lisa said, tapping the sketch. "It draws people in." Doug shook his head. "It clogs the flow. People will bottleneck at the entrance." Lisa crossed her arms. "Doug, I've run a coffee shop for 5 years. Trust me, visibility matters." "And I've run a bookstore for 4, Doug countered. "Trust me, space matters." They stared at each other, the air taut with stubbornness and something else neither wanted to name. Finally, Lisa exhaled, her lips twitching. "We're ridiculous." Doug grinned, the tension breaking like a snapped string. "Completely." Lisa laughed, shaking her head. "Fine. Middle of the room. Compromise." "Deal," Doug said, offering his hand. She took it, her fingers warm against his, and for a heartbeat, neither of them let go. By the time they packed up, the contractors had gone, leaving the space quiet and raw, a skeleton waiting for flesh. Doug walked Lisa to the door, the night air crisp and silver beyond the glass. "Tomorrow," she said, smiling. "Tomorrow," Doug echoed, his voice softer than he meant. She paused, her hand on the door, and for a moment, it felt like the world tilted, just enough for Doug to wonder if this was more than business. Then she was gone, her laughter trailing behind her like a ribbon. Doug locked up, stood in the half-finished lounge, and let himself imagine, for one dangerous second, what it would feel like if she stayed. Chapter 7. Opening day chaos. The morning of the grand opening dawned bright and brittle, sunlight bouncing off snowbanks like shards of glass. Doug stood outside Howard's Books, staring at the new glass partition gleaming behind the front windows. Beyond it, Lisa's coffee counter curved like a smile, her idea, and now his favorite detail. Inside, the air buzzed with anticipation. The scent of fresh paint mingled with coffee and pastries, and Doug felt a surge of pride and panic. Everything was ready. Mostly. Probably. Doug. Lisa's voice rang out from behind the counter. She wore a crisp white apron over a soft blue sweater, her hair pulled back but with a few rebellious strands framing her face. She looked like someone who belonged here, and Doug had to remind himself to breathe. "We're out of napkins," she said, waving an empty dispenser like a distress signal. Doug blinked. "Napkins? We bought a case." Lisa shook her head. "They're in the back, under something heavy." "I tried." Doug jogged to the storage room, weaving through a growing crowd of customers. The town had turned out in force. Neighbors, regulars, curious newcomers, all drawn by the promise of books and coffee under one roof. Doug grabbed the napkins, nearly tripped over a box of mugs, and returned victorious. "Hero," Lisa said, grinning as she snatched the stack. "Now go smile at people before they think you're hiding in the back." Doug chuckled, scanning the room. The reading lounge was alive, chairs filled, books in hands, laughter spilling like sunlight. And the coffee counter? Packed. Lisa moved like a whirlwind, pouring lattes, sliding pastries across the counter, her smile bright even as chaos nipped at her heels. Then came the first hiccup. The espresso machine hissed ominously, then sputtered like a dying dragon. Lisa froze mid-pour. "No, no, no." Doug was at her side in seconds. "What happened?" "It's clogged," she said, panic flickering in her eyes. "I cleaned it last night." Doug grabbed a wrench from the emergency kit, because of course he had one, and crouched beside the machine. "I've got this." Lisa blinked. "You fix espresso machines now?" Doug grinned. "Bookstore owner. Coffee enthusiast. Amateur plumber. Stand back." 5 minutes later, after some muttered curses and one near-scalding incident, the machine roared back to life. The crowd cheered. Lisa laughed, relief washing over her like sunlight after a storm. "You're ridiculous," she said, handing him a steaming cup. "And amazing." Doug took the coffee, his fingers brushing hers. "Add that to my resume." The day rolled on in a blur of laughter and caffeine. Doug floated between shelves and counter, greeting customers, recommending books, and sneaking glances at Lisa whenever he could. She was radiant, tired, yes, but glowing with the kind of joy that comes from fighting for something and winning. By late afternoon, the crowd thinned, leaving the lounge bathed in golden light. Doug leaned against a shelf, watching Lisa wipe down the counter, her movements slow now, deliberate. Emma sat in a recliner nearby, coloring dinosaurs with fierce concentration. "Not bad for day one," Doug said, stepping closer. Lisa looked up, her smile soft. "Not bad at all." Their eyes held, and for a moment, the world narrowed to the space between them. The hum of the heater, the scent of coffee, the quiet thrum of possibility. Doug felt it, the pull, the question, and before he could stop himself, he leaned in. Lisa's breath hitched. Her lips parted. "Mommy!" Emma's voice sliced through the moment like a cymbal crash. "Look, my dinosaur has a hat." Lisa laughed, stepping back, cheeks flushed. "That's adorable, sweetie." Doug swallowed a groan and smiled instead. "Nice hat," he said, crouching to admire the drawing. Emma beamed. "He's fancy." Doug chuckled, but his pulse was still racing, his thoughts tangled in what almost happened, and what might still. When Lisa packed up later, Doug walked her to the door, the night air crisp and silver beyond the glass. Emma skipped ahead, humming a tune only she knew. "Today was," Lisa began, then trailed off, her smile saying the rest. "Yeah," Doug said softly. "It was." She hesitated, her hand on the door, and for a heartbeat, it felt like the world tilted again, just enough for Doug to wonder if tomorrow would bring the moment they missed. Then she was gone, her laughter lingering like the scent of fresh coffee. Doug locked up, stood in the quiet glow of the lounge, and let himself hope, for the first time in years, that the best chapters were still unwritten. Chapter 8. Stirring emotions. The first month after the grand opening was a blur of coffee, books, and chatter. The partnership worked better than Doug had dared hope. Customers lingered longer, sales climbed, and the lounge buzzed with life. It was everything he'd imagined and more. But success came with its own kind of chaos. Doug noticed it one Thursday afternoon when Lisa stood behind the counter. Her smile stretched thin as she juggled 3 drink orders, a pastry restock, and a phone call about a delayed shipment. Emma sat in the corner coloring, oblivious to the storm swirling around her mother. Doug crossed the lounge, weaving through customers, and leaned on the counter. "You okay?" Lisa blew out a breath, tucking a stray strand of hair behind her ear. "Define okay." Doug smiled gently. "Not buried under a mountain of stress?" Lisa laughed, but it sounded brittle. "Then no, I'm not okay." Doug hesitated, then said, "Want me to handle the register for a bit?" Lisa blinked. "You?" "Behind the counter." Doug grinned. "I've read at least 3 books about coffee." I'm practically an expert. Lisa laughed for real this time, the tension easing from her shoulders. Fine. But if you ruin someone's latte art, you're fired. Doug slipped behind the counter, rolling up his sleeves like a man about to duel fate. Show me the ropes. 10 minutes later, Doug had learned two things. 1. Steaming milk was harder than it looked. And 2. Lisa's laughter when he botched a foam heart was worth every spilled drop. Is that a cloud? She teased, peering at the cup. Doug squinted. It's abstract art. Lisa grinned. Sure, let's call it that. Their eyes met over the counter, and for a moment, the noise faded. The hum of conversation, the clink of mugs, the world beyond the glass. Doug felt it again, that pull, that question he kept trying not to ask. Then the door opened, and in walked Trouble. Lisa! A man strode in, tall, polished, wearing a coat that probably cost more than Doug's monthly rent. His smile was smooth, practiced, the kind that belonged in boardrooms, not bookstores. Lisa stiffened. Ethan. Doug's stomach sank. Ex-fiancé? No, too young. Ex-something. Ethan leaned on the counter like he owned it. Heard you opened a new spot. Thought I'd check it out. Lisa's smile was polite, but her fingers tightened on the edge of the counter. We're busy, Ethan. Ethan glanced at Doug, his eyes cool. And you are. Doug straightened, wiping his hands on a towel. Doug Howard. Owner. Ethan's brows lifted. Owner? Impressive. Doug smiled, the kind that didn't reach his eyes. Thanks. The air crackled with something sharp, competition, maybe, or the kind of tension that made Doug want to throw Ethan out on principle. Instead, he stepped back, letting Lisa handle it, even as his chest burned with questions he had no right to ask. Ethan lingered too long, talking about catching up and old times, until Lisa finally shut him down with a firm smile and a promise to call, one Doug suspected she wouldn't keep. When the door closed behind him, Lisa sagged against the counter, her breath shaky. Sorry, she murmured. That was awkward. Doug hesitated, then said softly, You don't owe him anything. Lisa looked at him, her eyes tired but grateful. I know. Thanks. Doug wanted to say more, wanted to tell her she deserved better, wanted to ask if she saw what he saw when their hands brushed over coffee cups, but instead he just smiled and went back to steaming milk because timing was everything and this wasn't it. Later, when the shop emptied and Emma tugged on Doug's sleeve to show him her latest dinosaur masterpiece, Lisa watched them from across the room, something warm flickering in her chest. She didn't know what it meant yet, but she knew it mattered. Outside, snow began to fall again, soft and steady, as if the world was writing its own love story in white. Chapter 9. The festival fiasco. The town's winter festival was the kind of event that made postcards jealous. Twinkling lights strung across Main Street, snowflakes drifting like confetti, and the scent of cinnamon and roasted nuts curling through the air. Doug stood behind the booth he and Lisa had set up, a cheerful display of books and steaming cups of coffee, trying to ignore the fact that his fingers were already numb. This was your idea, Lisa reminded him, tugging her knit hat lower as she arranged a tray of pastries. Don't look so miserable. Doug grinned, blowing into his hands. I said, community engagement, not frostbite. Lisa laughed, and the sound warmed him more than the space heater humming at their feet. Emma sat nearby, bundled in a pink coat, happily decorating cookies with enough sprinkles to qualify as a structural hazard. The festival was packed, families strolling, kids squealing, carolers harmonizing near the gazebo. Their booth was a hit, drawing curious browsers and caffeine seekers alike. Doug handed out paperbacks while Lisa worked her coffee magic, and for a while, everything felt perfect. Until the cocoa incident. It started innocently enough. A customer asked for extra whipped cream. Lisa obliged, piling it high like a snowy mountain. Doug, trying to be helpful, reached for the cup and knocked over the entire container of cocoa powder. It exploded like a chocolate volcano, coating the counter, the pastries, and Doug himself in a fine brown dust. Lisa froze, then burst out laughing so hard she had to grab the edge of the table for support. Oh my, Doug, you look like a truffle. Doug wiped his face, coughing. I was going for rugged outdoorsman. Try dessert chic, Lisa teased, handing him a towel. Customers chuckled. Emma squealed with delight, and Doug, mortified but grinning, helped clean up, his dignity buried under a mountain of cocoa. The fiasco didn't end there. 10 minutes later, a rogue snowball from a nearby kid's game sailed through the air and landed squarely in Lisa's coffee pitcher, sending a splash of latte across the table. Lisa gasped, then laughed again, shaking her head. We're cursed. Doug grinned, tossing the snowball back toward the giggling culprits. Or blessed. Depends on your perspective. Lisa shot him a look, her eyes sparkling despite the chaos. You're enjoying this. Only because you're laughing, Doug said before he could stop himself. Her smile softened, and for a moment, the noise of the festival faded. The carols, the chatter, the crunch of snow under boots. It was just them, standing in a booth that smelled like coffee and cocoa, grinning like fools. As dusk settled and the lights glowed brighter, they packed up, their fingers brushing over mugs and trays, each touch sending a quiet spark through Doug's chest. Emma skipped ahead, humming, her boots leaving tiny prints in the snow. Lisa paused, glancing back at the booth, then at Doug. Despite the chocolate explosion, this was fun. Doug smiled. Chaos builds character. Lisa laughed, her breath misting in the cold. You and your character building. Doug hesitated, then said softly, I like doing this with you. Lisa's eyes met his, and for a heartbeat, the world tilted. The kind of tilt that made Doug want to close the distance, to say what had been simmering for weeks. But Emma called out, waving a half-eaten cookie like a victory flag, and the moment slipped away, leaving Doug with nothing but the echo of Lisa's smile and the ache of what almost was. Later, as Doug walked home through the quiet streets, snow crunching under his boots, he realized something. He wasn't just building a business. He was building a life, and Lisa was at the center of it, whether she knew it or not. Chapter 10. Confessions over coffee. The bookstore was quiet after closing, the kind of quiet that felt earned, like a deep breath after a long run. Snow tapped softly against the windows, and the lamps in the lounge cast pools of golden light across the worn wood floor. Doug stood behind the counter, wiping down a stack of mugs, when Lisa appeared in the doorway. She looked tired, but in that beautiful way that spoke of a day well lived. Hair loose around her shoulders, cheeks flushed from the cold, a faint smile tugging at her lips. Still here? She asked, stepping inside. Doug grinned. Owner perks. I get to clean up after everyone. Lisa laughed, setting her bag on a chair. I brought reinforcements. She held up a thermos and 2 cups. The good stuff. Doug's smile softened. You didn't have to. I wanted to, she said simply. They settled at the big oak table, steam curling from their cups, the scent of rich coffee wrapping around them like a blanket. For a while, they talked about the day, sales numbers, customer compliments, Emma's latest dinosaur obsession. But the conversation drifted, as it always seemed to lately, into quieter waters. Lisa traced the rim of her cup, her voice softer now. You ever think about how you got here? Doug tilted his head. Here as in this table? Or this life? Lisa smiled faintly. Both. Doug leaned back, considering. Every day. 5 years ago, I thought I had it all figured out. Career, engagement, the whole picture. Turns out, the picture wasn't mine. Lisa watched him, her eyes warm, inviting. So you started over? Doug nodded. I had to. I didn't want to spend my life proving I was enough for someone who didn't see me. If I ever find love again. He hesitated, then met her gaze. They deserve all of me, not my baggage. Silence stretched, gentle and charged. Lisa's fingers stilled on her cup. That's brave. Doug smiled wryly. Or stupid. Lisa shook her head. No, brave. She looked down then, her voice barely above a whisper. I didn't plan this either. Being a single mom. Running a business. Some days I feel like I'm holding the world together with duct tape. Doug's chest tightened. You're doing more than holding it together. You're building something amazing. Lisa laughed softly, but her eyes shimmered. You really think so? Doug reached across the table, his hand covering hers before he could second-guess the impulse. I know so. Her breath caught, and for a moment, the world narrowed to the warmth of his hand, the steady weight of his gaze. Then she turned her palm, fingers curling around his, and Doug felt something shift, quiet, certain, like a page turning. Doug, she said, her voice trembling just enough to make his heart pound. I don't know where this goes. I don't have all the answers. Me neither, he said softly. But I know I want to find out. Her smile was slow, tender, and when he leaned in, she met him halfway. The kiss was gentle at first, hesitant, like testing the water, but it deepened warm and sure, until Doug felt every piece of the last 5 years click into place. It wasn't fireworks. It was something better. Steady, real, earned. When they pulled back, Lisa laughed softly, her forehead resting against his. Well, she whispered, that's one way to end a meeting. Doug grinned, his thumb brushing her knuckles. Best meeting I've ever had. Outside, snow fell in soft, silent sheets, as if the world was writing its own love story in white. Chapter 11. Brewing trouble? Doug had never liked surprises. He liked plans, neat, orderly, predictable. So when Ethan walked into the bookstore on a quiet Tuesday afternoon, Doug felt the kind of jolt that made his stomach knot. Lisa was behind the counter, laughing at something Emma said, her hair catching the soft glow of the lamps. She looked happy, peaceful, and Doug wanted to freeze the moment, keep it safe. But then Ethan's voice cut through the hum like a blade. Lisa. She turned, and Doug saw it, the flicker in her eyes quick and sharp, before she masked it with a polite smile. Ethan, what are you doing here? Ethan smiled, smooth as polished glass. Just checking in. Heard the shop's doing well. Doug stepped closer, his hands curling into fists he didn't plan to use. We're busy, he said evenly. Ethan's gaze slid to Doug, assessing, calculating. Doug Howard, right? The bookstore guy. Doug nodded, his jaw tight. That's me. Ethan's smile widened, but it didn't reach his eyes. Impressive setup. Coffee and books. Cute idea. Doug felt heat crawl up his neck, but before he could speak, Lisa cut in. Ethan, if you need something, I need to talk, Ethan said, his tone softening as he looked at her. Just 5 minutes. Lisa hesitated, and Doug hated the way his chest clenched at that pause. Fine, she said finally. In the back. Doug watched them walk toward the lounge, every instinct screaming to follow, but he stayed put, because this wasn't his fight. Not yet. 5 minutes stretched into 10. Doug busied himself with shelving, but his ears strained for voices, catching fragments. Ethan's low, coaxing tone, Lisa's sharper replies. When they returned, Lisa's smile was brittle, her shoulders tense. Everything okay? Doug asked quietly. Lisa nodded too quickly. Fine. Doug didn't believe her, but Emma bounded over, waving a picture of a dinosaur in a tutu, and the moment slipped away. Later, when the shop emptied and Emma was with her grandmother, Lisa lingered by the counter, her fingers tracing the edge like she needed something solid to hold. Doug, she said softly. About earlier. You don't have to explain, he said, though every nerve in his body wanted answers. Lisa sighed, meeting his gaze. Ethan's persistent. He thinks we should try again. Doug's chest tightened. And you? Lisa's smile was sad, tired. I told him no, but he doesn't take no easily. Doug exhaled, relief and frustration tangling in his throat. If he makes trouble, I can handle him, Lisa said, her voice steady even as her eyes shimmered with something fragile. I've been handling things for a long time. Doug stepped closer, his hand brushing hers before he could stop himself. You don't have to handle everything alone. Lisa looked at him then, really looked, and for a heartbeat, the air between them felt charged, humming with all the words they hadn't said. Doug, she whispered, her voice trembling just enough to break his heart. I don't want drama. I just want peace. Doug nodded, his fingers curling around hers, gentle but sure. Then that's what we'll build. Outside, snow fell in soft, silent sheets, but inside, Doug felt the storm, and the promise gathering. Chapter 12. Love on the menu. The storm passed quietly. Not the snowstorm outside, but the one Ethan stirred up. After his visit, Lisa kept her word. Firm boundaries, no drama. Doug admired her strength, even as he fought the urge to track Ethan down and explain the concept of no in very short sentences. Business thrived. The coffee nook and bookstore had become the town's favorite refuge, a place where laughter mingled with the scent of espresso and the rustle of pages. Doug loved watching it happen, loved seeing Lisa in her element, her smile genuine now, her laughter easy. But what he loved most were the small moments, the way her hand brushed his when they reached for the same mug, the way her eyes softened when Emma tugged him into a coloring session, the way his heart felt less like a solitary thing and more like part of something whole. It was a Saturday afternoon when Emma delivered the knockout punch. Doug was restocking shelves when the little whirlwind appeared, clutching a piece of construction paper covered in glitter and stickers. Doug, she chirped, bouncing on her toes. I made you something. Doug crouched, smiling. Let's see. Emma thrust the paper at him. In bright, wobbly letters, it read, Best Coffee Buddy, surrounded by hearts and, of course, dinosaurs wearing aprons. Doug's throat tightened. Wow, Emma, this is amazing. Emma beamed. Mom helped with the spelling. Doug glanced up, and Lisa stood a few feet away, watching with a smile that made his chest ache in the best way. She's very proud of you, Lisa said softly. Doug looked back at Emma, his voice warm. I'm gonna hang this where everyone can see. Emma grinned, then darted off to show a customer her glitter masterpiece. Doug rose slowly, the paper trembling just a little in his hand. Lisa stepped closer, her eyes shimmering. She adores you. Doug swallowed, his voice low. I adore her too. Their eyes held, and for a moment, the hum of the shop faded. The clink of cups, the murmur of voices, the world beyond the glass. Doug felt it again, that steady certainty, and this time he didn't fight it. Later, when the shop emptied and the lamps cast soft halos across the lounge, Doug and Lisa lingered by the counter, their hands brushing as they wiped down surfaces. Lisa laughed at something he said, her head tipping back, and Doug thought, this is it. This is home. Lisa, he said quietly, his fingers curling around hers. I meant what I said before. I want to build something with you. Not just this place. Her breath caught, and for a heartbeat, the world tilted. Then she smiled, slow and sure, and squeezed his hand. Me too. Doug grinned, his chest so full it felt like sunlight spilling through every crack. Good, because I've got plans. Lisa laughed softly. Plans? Big ones, Doug said, his thumb brushing her knuckles. Starting with dinner. No blueprints, no budgets. Just us. Her smile deepened. Sounds perfect. Outside, snow fell in lazy spirals, and inside, love settled like warmth in winter. A quiet, steady thing that promised spring. Chapter 13. Epilogue. A year later. Spring sunlight spilled through the wide front windows of Howard's Books and Brews, turning the glass partition into a shimmering frame for the life Doug and Lisa had built together. The reading lounge hummed with quiet conversation, the scent of coffee mingling with the soft rustle of pages. It was everything Doug had imagined, and more. He stood behind the counter, wiping down a stack of mugs, when Lisa appeared with a tray of pastries, her smile as bright as the morning. "Full house today," she said, nodding toward the lounge where customers curled in chairs, books open, cups steaming. Doug grinned. "We're becoming a hazard for productivity." Lisa laughed, setting the tray down. "And I'm not sorry." Emma burst in from the back, a whirlwind of pigtails and glitter, clutching a piece of paper like a trophy. "Doug, look." Doug crouched, smiling as she thrust the paper at him. In bold, colorful letters, it read, "Best bonus dad ever," surrounded by hearts and, of course, dinosaurs wearing aprons. Doug's throat tightened. "Wow, Em, this is incredible." Emma beamed. "Mom helped with the spelling." Doug glanced up, and Lisa stood a few feet away, her eyes shimmering with something that made his chest ache in the best way. "She's very proud of you," Lisa said softly. Doug looked back at Emma, his voice warm. "I'm proud of you too." Emma grinned, then darted off to show a customer her masterpiece, leaving Doug and Lisa in a quiet bubble of sunlight and possibility. Lisa stepped closer, her fingers brushing his as she reached for a mug. "You okay?" she asked softly. Doug smiled, his thumb tracing the edge of her hand. "Better than okay." Her eyes held his steady and sure. "Me too." They stood there for a moment, the hum of the shop wrapping around them like music, and Doug thought, "This is it. This is home. Not the kind you find in a blueprint or a business plan, but the kind you build with laughter and late nights and cocoa disasters. The kind you fight for, the kind you love." Outside, the world was green and bright, and inside, life was warm and steady. A story still being written, one page at a time.